You don't feel bad. That's the confusing part. Nothing is technically wrong. Life looks fine. You wake up. You move through your day. You answer messages. You keep up. And yet, somewhere underneath all of that, there's a flatness. Not pain. Not sadness. Just nothing. A quiet absence you don't know how to name. You've noticed it in small moments. When something good happens and your reaction arrives late. Or not at all. When you laugh. But it feels like the sound comes from somewhere else. When you're alone. And the silence feels heavier than it should. You tell yourself it's normal. Everyone feels tired. Everyone gets bored. So you keep going. You stay functional. You stay polite. You stay productive. You don't fall apart. But you also don't feel present. And that's harder to explain. You look at your life from the outside and it checks the right boxes. Responsibilities handled. Relationships intact. No obvious crisis. If someone asked how you're doing, you'd probably say, "I'm good." And you wouldn't be lying. You'd just be skipping something. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes from feeling empty when you think you shouldn't. Because emptiness doesn't match the story. You weren't supposed to feel this way. Not now. Not here. So you don't bring it up. You assume it means you're ungrateful, or dramatic, or broken in some vague, embarrassing way. You scroll past other people's lives and wonder why they seem more alive inside their moments. You try not to compare, but you do. You tell yourself you just need rest, or a distraction, or something new. So you fill the space. Noise helps. Screens help. Being busy helps. For a while. Until the moment passes and the quiet comes back. That same hollow pause. It's not loud. It doesn't demand attention. It just waits. You've learned how to outrun obvious pain. But this isn't pain. It's absence. And absence doesn't chase you. It lets you walk ahead, pretending you don't notice it following. You can feel it most clearly at night, when there's nothing left to perform. No roles to maintain. No conversations to manage. Just you. And a sense that something inside you has been on mute for a long time. You try to remember when you last felt fully engaged with your own life. Not excited. Not happy. Just there. Sometimes you can't pinpoint it. It wasn't one moment. It was gradual. A series of small adjustments. You learned what was expected. You learned what worked. You learned what kept things smooth. So you adapted. You became agreeable, capable, reasonable. You stopped asking certain questions because they didn't lead anywhere useful. You stopped expressing certain feelings because they complicated things. You learned which parts of yourself were easier to keep quiet. And you didn't call it loss. You called it maturity. You told yourself this is what stability feels like. This is what adulthood is. This is what having it together looks like. But something kept shrinking. Not dramatically, subtly. Like a room you stop using until the air goes stale and you forget what it was for. You didn't choose emptiness. You arrived here by being careful. By choosing the sensible option, the safer response, the calmer version of yourself. You avoided conflict. You avoided disappointment. You avoided being too much. You kept things even. And in the process, you flattened your inner world. Not intentionally. You just learned to manage yourself. You became very good at functioning without checking in. At handling life instead of experiencing it. There's a moment you don't talk about. The moment when you realized your reactions were delayed. When things happened and you felt them intellectually before you felt them emotionally. If you felt them at all. You noticed how quickly you explained yourself instead of just being. How often you minimized your own responses before anyone else could. How easily you slipped into observation mode, even in your own life. Watching yourself from a distance felt safer than being inside it. At first, that distance felt like control. You weren't overwhelmed anymore. You weren't as reactive. You weren't as vulnerable. You told yourself you'd grown. And maybe you had. But growth came with a trade. You learned how to stay composed by disconnecting, just enough to not feel too deeply. You didn't shut down completely. You just dimmed things. You stayed reachable, but guarded. Present, but buffered. Alive, but muted. The emptiness isn't because your life lacks meaning. It's because your inner life has been managed for so long that it no longer knows how to speak freely. You didn't lose yourself. You stored parts of yourself away for later, and later never quite came. There's a quiet tension in that, a sense of waiting without knowing what you're waiting for. You try to recreate feeling through activity, new routines, new goals, new plans. But achievement doesn't reach the emptiness. Neither does distraction. Because the emptiness isn't about what you're doing. It's about what you're not allowing. There are feelings you learn to outgrow before they finish speaking. Needs you labeled impractical. Desires you told yourself were unrealistic. Reactions you edited in real time. You became fluent in restraint. You learned how to respond correctly instead of honestly. And nothing catastrophic happened. Life kept moving. People stayed. Things worked out, which made it harder to notice the cost, because the cost was internal. A slow disconnection from your own emotional signal. You still feel things, just not fully. They pass through filters first. Is this reasonable? Is this necessary? Is this worth the trouble? By the time an emotion clears those questions, it's already diluted. What's left feels thin, manageable, empty. There's a strange grief in realizing that no one took this from you. You gave it up gradually, in exchange for peace, for stability, for not rocking the boat. You don't resent anyone for it. You just notice the quiet. You start to realize that feeling empty isn't the absence of feeling. It's the presence of suppression. It's what happens when expression is postponed long enough that the impulse fades. You taught yourself to stay calm at the expense of staying connected. And now, calm feels like nothing. There's a line that lingers here. Some people don't feel empty because they lack meaning, but because they've learned not to feel too much. You don't react to that line immediately. It just sits. Because it sounds uncomfortably familiar. You start noticing how often you override yourself. How quickly you move on from moments that should land. How rarely you ask, what did that actually feel like? You've been living in response mode, handling what's in front of you, adjusting, adapting, but not listening inward. Not because you don't care, because you learned that listening creates complications, and you've spent a long time trying to keep things uncomplicated. The emptiness isn't asking to be fixed, it's asking to be noticed. It's the echo of a self that learned to stay quiet to survive smoothly. And maybe, fine was never the same as fulfilled. And maybe, it never was. There's something you haven't considered. The emptiness isn't asking you to become more. It's asking you to stop editing yourself in real time. To stop checking every feeling before it finishes forming. You don't need to fix yourself. You don't need a new direction. Just notice how quickly you move away from what you feel. How fast you explain it. Soften it. Control it. What if the emptiness isn't a lack, but a backlog? Unfelt reactions, paused responses, moments that never got permission to land. They didn't vanish. They're still here, waiting quietly. Not to overwhelm you, just to be acknowledged without being corrected. You don't have to dig into your past. You don't have to change your life. Just notice this one thing. When something stirs inside you, do you stay, or do you manage it? The smallest shift isn't action. It's allowance. Letting a feeling stay a few seconds longer than usual. Letting silence stretch without filling it. Letting discomfort exist without solving it. That's where sensation returns. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But slowly. Life doesn't become full. It becomes inhabited again. If this didn't feel like new information, that's the point. Sometimes awareness isn't about learning something. It's about finally letting yourself notice. If this stayed with you, stay with it a little longer.